Welcome back to Midnight Outcry. Tonight, we're taking you on a cruise you'll never forget. Because behind the laughter, the music, and the luxury, the ocean hides secrets. These are true horror encounters. Real stories of passengers who vanished without a trace, cabins that shouldn't exist, and voices that still scream long after midnight. On the open sea, there's no escape, no police, no way off the ship. Just endless water, and whatever is waiting for you in the dark. So grab your headphones, dim the lights, and prepare yourself. Because once you hear these stories, you'll never look at a cruise ship the same way again. And before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Midnight Outcry, hit the bell icon, and tell us in the comments which city and country you're watching from. We'd love to know where our horror family is tuning in from. Story 1. The first scream came just after midnight. I was half asleep in my cabin, lulled by the hum of the engines, when it cut through the silence like a knife. High-pitched, raw, filled with terror. A woman's voice. I shot up in bed, heart hammering, straining to hear. The scream echoed again, longer this time, bouncing through the hallways as if carried by the very walls of the ship. I rushed to the door, pulling it open. The hallway outside was dim, only the soft emergency lights glowing. A few doors cracked open, confused faces peeking out. I wasn't the only one who'd heard it. Another scream ripped through the air, closer now, louder. It sounded like someone being torn apart. Passengers spilled into the hall, wide-eyed and whispering. A man muttered, "It's coming from the deck." A woman shook her head, insisting, "No, it's from below." From the engine room, crew members arrived quickly, trying to calm us down. "Please return to your cabins," one said firmly. "It's nothing to worry about, just mechanical noise." Mechanical noise? I thought. No machine screams like that. But eventually, the hall cleared. People returned to their cabins, muttering uneasily. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the ship sounded like another cry. The next morning, I asked around at breakfast. Some passengers admitted they'd heard it. Others denied it, brushing it off. But I noticed how their hands trembled, how they avoided eye contact. That night, it happened again. Midnight. The scream returned. Not one this time, but several. Layered. Men, women, children. A chorus of agony that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I ran to the hallway. More doors opened. More terrified faces. But the crew was there again, moving quickly, ushering people back into their rooms. "Everything is under control," they repeated. "Please, go back inside." But the screams kept coming, louder, closer, and this time I swore I heard words in them, not just screams. Cries for help. By the third night, the screams were no longer just rumors. Everyone had heard them. They started again, at midnight sharp, echoing through the decks with terrifying clarity. Not distant this time. Close. Too close. I lay frozen in bed as the first one tore through the silence, followed by another and another, until it sounded like an entire crowd was being slaughtered in the hall outside my cabin. I rushed out again, along with dozens of other passengers, mothers clutching children, men shouting in panic. People pressing against the walls as if expecting something to burst through. The screams rose and fell, sometimes faint, sometimes deafening, but always inhumanly desperate. And then, after nearly an hour, they stopped, leaving a silence so heavy it felt wrong. The next morning, I expected an announcement, an explanation, something. But the captain said nothing. The daily bulletin made no mention of the night's horrors. At breakfast, the whispers were everywhere. Some passengers insisted the screams came from the lower decks. Others swore it was the sound of people trapped in the walls. One man claimed he'd looked out his cabin window and seen faces pressed against the glass, pale, distorted, screaming without sound. The crew grew colder. When passengers confronted them, they snapped back. "There are no screams. You're imagining things." Imagining? No. We all heard it. That night, the screams returned again, louder, longer. But something had changed. I recognized one of the voices. It was a woman I'd met just 2 days earlier, an older lady who had shared a story about her travels while we waited in the buffet line. She had laughed warmly, said this cruise was her dream trip, and now I was certain it was her voice I heard, shrieking in the darkness. I wasn't the only one. Passengers began murmuring that the screams sounded familiar, that they could hear neighbors, friends, even family members crying out in the night. But when we checked in the morning, those same people were gone, their cabins empty, their belongings left behind. The crew's response? They disembarked early. Impossible. We were in the middle of the ocean. The truth was undeniable now. The screams weren't just echoes. They were passengers being taken, and the terrifying question that lingered in every whisper, every sideways glance. Who would be next? By the 5th night, no one pretended anymore. Passengers gathered in the hallways before midnight, waiting, whispering, praying. Some clutched their luggage as if ready to flee, though there was nowhere to go. Children cried quietly, their parents rocking them, whispering reassurances they didn't believe. And then, as the clock struck 12, it began. The first scream tore through the corridors like a blade, followed by another, then another, until it became a wall of sound. 100 voices, maybe more, shrieking, begging, wailing. The walls shook with it, the lights flickered. The air itself seemed to vibrate with terror. People screamed back, covering their ears, some collapsing to the floor. One man shouted at the ceiling, "Stop it! Stop it!" His voice was drowned in the tide of agony. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I followed the sound. Through stairwells, past crew-only doors, deeper into the ship than passengers were supposed to go. The screams guided me like a rope in the dark, always ahead, always just around the next corner. Finally, I reached a locked steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The screams on the other side were deafening. My hands shook as I pressed my ear to it and froze because I recognized another voice, my neighbor, the woman in the cabin across from mine. She had waved at me that very morning, smiling faintly as she carried her breakfast back to her room. Now, she was screaming. Pounding on the door, I shouted for help. For a second, I thought I heard her pounding back, but then the screams cut off. All at once, like a switch had been flipped. Silence. My stomach turned cold. The door creaked open behind me. I spun, but it wasn't my neighbor. It was a crewman, his face pale, his uniform damp with sweat. His eyes darted nervously up and down the corridor. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. "What's happening?" I demanded. "Where are they? The people who scream?" He swallowed hard, his lips trembling. "Don't ask. Don't listen. Just stay in your cabin and pray it doesn't come for you." Before I could stop him, he slammed the door shut again, locking it tight. That night, when the screams returned, I stayed in my cabin. But they weren't distant anymore. They were inside the walls. And when I pressed my ear against the metal, I heard them clearly, voices I knew, pleading, sobbing, crying for help. And underneath it all, faint but undeniable, something else, a low, guttural growl, not human, not even close. On the 6th night, the ship felt different, too quiet. Passengers huddled in their cabins long before midnight, doors locked, lights off, as if hiding from something they couldn't escape. I stayed awake, waiting. My ears strained against the silence. Midnight passed. For the first time in nearly a week, nothing. No screams. Relief swept through me, sharp and fragile. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever nightmare had haunted us was finally gone. And then I heard it. A single scream. Not echoing through the halls this time. Not coming from the walls. From my cabin. I froze, blood turning to ice. The scream came again, raw and broken, and this time I recognized it immediately. It was my voice. I stumbled back, staring at the walls as the sound ripped through them. My voice, screaming in agony, again and again, bouncing from metal to metal. I covered my ears, but it didn't stop. I shouted, "Stop!" But my voice only joined the chorus, layering over itself until the cabin was filled with an impossible cacophony of my own screams. The lights flickered, the walls seemed to tremble, and then I heard words in the noise, twisted through my own voice. "Join us." The door rattled. Slowly, the lock clicked open on its own. I didn't touch it. I didn't move. But the door creaked open, revealing nothing but the dark hallway outside. And there they stood, the missing passengers. Dozens of them, pale and hollow-eyed, their mouths open in silent screams. Their bodies flickered, like shadows caught between lightning strikes. My neighbor, the old woman from the buffet, even children, all of them staring at me, their jaws hanging open wider and wider until their faces stretched into grotesque shapes. And then, in unison, they whispered in voices that were all mine, "It's your turn." The lights went out. When I woke, it was morning. My cabin was neat, my belongings untouched, the hallway silent. I staggered out, searching for anyone. But the ship was empty. Cabins wide open, beds unmade, luggage abandoned. Hundreds of passengers gone. Not a single voice remained. Only me. And in the silence, I swear I still heard it. Faint, buried deep within the walls. My own scream. Still echoing. Still trapped. And if you think that's terrifying, wait until you hear the next story. Because sometimes, the horror doesn't come from storms or screams. Sometimes, it comes from something worse. The ship's own crew. Story 2. We spotted the ship just after sunrise, drifting silently, no flag, no signal. By noon, we boarded it. By sunset, we realized we weren't alone. It was supposed to be the highlight of the cruise. A calm morning at sea, nothing but sunlight glinting off the waves. I was on the observation deck, sipping coffee, when I noticed it. Far on the horizon, a dark shape cutting through the water. A ship. At first, I thought it was another cruise liner, but as it drew closer, the details became clearer and stranger. Its paint was faded, peeling in long strips, windows shattered. Rust streaks ran down the hull like dried blood. No music, no movement, just silence. A ghost ship. The announcement came shortly after. "Attention passengers. We've spotted an abandoned vessel. For safety reasons, please remain inside while the crew investigates." Abandoned. That's the word they used. But I swear I saw movement. A shadow slipping past one of the broken windows. By noon, curiosity won. A small group of us gathered on the deck as the crew lowered a boat. We begged to join. Against their better judgment, they allowed it. The closer we came, the colder the air grew. My skin prickled with goosebumps. Climbing aboard, my shoes echoed against the deck. Everything was wet, slick with seawater, though the day was dry and calm. The hallways smelled of salt and rot. Wallpaper hung in strips. Doors swung open and shut with every shift of the ship, creaking like whispers. And then we saw it. A dining hall, tables still set, plates of food, half-eaten, covered in mold, glasses filled with cloudy water, chairs pushed back as if people had left in a hurry. But no people, not a single body. One of the crew muttered, "Everyone just disappeared." But I shook my head, because as we turned to leave, I saw them. Handprints, dozens of them, smeared across the walls. Wet, fresh, as if someone or something was still here. We split into two groups, half searching the upper decks, the rest of us moving below. The air inside was heavier now, damp and suffocating, as if the walls themselves were breathing. I passed cabin after cabin, each one identical. Beds unmade, suitcases half open, belongings scattered like their owners had simply vanished mid-motion. In one, a child's toy lay on the floor, a little stuffed bear. Its fur was soaked through, dripping steadily, though the room was bone dry. In another, the mirror was fogged. I wiped my hand across it, only to freeze. The reflection showed the room perfectly, except I wasn't in it. Behind me, one of the crew whispered, "Let's get out of here." His voice cracked, shaking with fear. But we didn't. We pressed deeper. The hall twisted, strangely, longer than it should have been. The doors repeating 213, 213, 213, the same number on every cabin. Whispers began to follow us, faint at first, like the ocean inside seashells. Then, clearer. A chorus of voices murmuring words we couldn't understand, until suddenly, one of them became clear. It said my name. I froze, staring at the door beside me. Slowly, the handle turned on its own. "Don't open it," one of the passengers hissed, but curiosity burned hotter than fear. I reached out and pushed it open. The room inside was empty, except for the bed. The sheets were soaked red, dripping onto the floor in a slow, steady rhythm. Drip, drip, drip. And on the pillow, carved into the fabric, were 3 words burned into the cloth. "We see you." I stumbled back, choking on panic. That's when the scream ripped through the hall. One of our group was gone. A young man named Carter, last seen standing just behind me. His flashlight clattered to the floor, beam shaking wildly across the walls. We searched every cabin, every corner. Nothing. But the whispers were louder now, no longer distant, no longer many. Just one, and it was Carter's voice, crying out for help. From inside the walls, we should have turned back. We should have run the second Carter vanished. But instead, fear made us stupid. "Keep searching," one of the crew barked, his voice trembling. "He has to be here somewhere." We pushed deeper, flashlights cutting through the dark. The air grew colder, every breath puffing white in front of us. The whispers followed, always close, always familiar. Sometimes they sounded like Carter, begging us to help. Sometimes they sounded like children, laughing just beyond the beam of our lights. Then, we reached the ballroom. Once, it must have been beautiful. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their glass cracked and swaying. The floor was littered with overturned chairs. Half-filled glasses of champagne lined the bar as if frozen in time. But what froze us wasn't the room. It was the footprints, dozens of them. Bare, wet footprints scattered across the floor, some small, some large, but none of them leading out, only circling, endlessly circling. One of the passengers snapped. "This is wrong. This ship isn't empty, someone's playing with us." He bolted toward a side door before we could stop him. The door slammed shut behind him. His screams cut the air, a high, tearing sound, followed by silence. When we forced the door open, the room beyond was empty, except for his shoes, still wet. The crew tried to pull us together, tried to act in control, but their faces told the truth. They were just as terrified as we were. "This isn't a rescue," I whispered, my voice barely audible, but everyone heard it. "We weren't meant to find this ship. We were meant to board it." The realization settled over us like a shadow. Because it was true. The ship wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. And now, it had us. By now, we were only 5 left. 3 passengers, 2 crew. The rest had been taken, one by one. Always sudden, always silent, their screams swallowed into the walls. We decided to head for the engine room. If we could start the ship, maybe we could turn it back toward our own vessel. Maybe escape. The lower we went, the worse it became. The walls wept with seawater, rivulets streaming down like tears. Doors groaned as if in pain when we pushed them open. And everywhere, the whispers. They weren't random anymore. They spoke in unison. Not Carter, not the others, all of them. Stay with us. Join us. Forever. Finally, we reached the engine room, but there were no engines. Just an empty cavern. The walls stretched higher than they should have, lined with rows of seats bolted into the steel. And in those seats sat passengers. Hundreds of them. Not just the ones from our group. People from decades ago. Their clothes old-fashioned, their eyes wide and milky, skin pale and dripping, mouths open in soundless screams, all staring forward, waiting. The crewman with us dropped to his knees, his voice cracked, whispering through tears. "It's true. The stories are true. This ship doesn't run on engines. It runs on them." Before we could react, the lights flickered, and the passengers turned. Every single one of them, their mouths opened together. This time, they screamed. A sound so piercing, so inhuman, it rattled my bones and made blood drip from my ears. The crewman collapsed, convulsing. The two passengers with me fled into the dark, their screams fading into nothing. And then I was alone. The chairs in the front row shifted. One was empty. Waiting, the whispers swelled, flooding the cavern. "Sit." My body moved without my permission. My legs buckled, dragging me forward. I tried to fight, to resist, but it was useless. The closer I got to the chair, the heavier the air became, pressing me down. I collapsed into it. The metal clamps locked around my wrists, my ankles, my chest. The whispers became one voice. "Now you belong to us." The lights dimmed, my body grew cold, my vision blurred, the world flickering in and out like static. And then I understood. This ship wasn't drifting aimlessly, it was hunting, searching for new passengers to replace the ones it had already devoured. That's why it appears, again and again, on calm seas. Why it looks abandoned, waiting to be boarded. It isn't a ghost ship, it's a trap. The last thing I saw before darkness took me was my reflection in the steel wall across from me. My eyes, pale, empty, staring forward like the others. And my mouth, opening wide to whisper the same words in unison. "Stay with us, forever." Story 3. The first 3 days of the voyage were perfect. Sunshine on the decks, calm waves stretching into the horizon, blue skies that seemed endless. The kind of weather travel brochures promise but rarely deliver. People laughed by the pool, music played late into the night, and the ocean seemed like nothing more than a sparkling backdrop to paradise. But on the fourth night, everything changed. It began with clouds. Not the soft kind that roll lazily across the horizon, but walls of black rising from nowhere. By dinner, the sky had vanished under a ceiling of storm clouds so heavy it felt like the sun had been switched off. The wind picked up, whistling through the railings, and the air smelled sharp, metallic, like the taste of lightning before it strikes. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and rehearsed. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a passing storm system. Please remain indoors until further notice." But here's the thing. I had checked the forecast before boarding. Calm seas, no storms for hundreds of miles. And other passengers had too. A storm like this couldn't just appear out of nowhere. By midnight, the waves hit. The ship rocked violently, plates and glasses shattering in the dining hall. People clutched handrails. Children cried. Crew hurried to secure furniture. Rain lashed against the windows with a force that sounded less like water and more like fists pounding to get in. We told ourselves it was just one bad night. But then morning came, and the storm was still there. The sky was as black as midnight, lightning splitting the horizon, thunder rolling endlessly. The ship groaned with every wave, steel bending like something alive. We couldn't see more than a few feet beyond the railings. The ocean wasn't blue anymore. It was black, an endless churning void. Day turned to night, and night back to day, but the storm never lifted, not for a second. By the third day, whispers spread among passengers. Why hasn't it cleared? Why don't we turn back? Why isn't anyone telling us what's happening? I asked a crew member if we were rerouting. His face was pale, his voice tight. We can't. The storm, it surrounds us. That night, I lay awake listening to the ship groan and creak, every crash of thunder shaking the walls. I tried to tell myself it was just bad luck, just a long storm. But deep down, I felt it. This wasn't a storm you could sail through. This was something else, something that didn't want us to leave. By the 5th day inside the storm, people stopped asking when it would end. They started asking if it would. The decks were closed permanently. Pools were drained, chairs bolted down, lifeboats locked tight against the waves that clawed at them like giant hands. The once lively hallways grew quieter, filled not with laughter, but with murmurs and sobs. Meals grew smaller. Supplies were being rationed. The buffet lines we had enjoyed only a few days before now served cold sandwiches, fruit bruised and soft, portions cut in half. The crew insisted it was temporary until the storm clears, but no one believed that anymore. Inside the cabins, the walls creaked constantly. Every few minutes, a crash of thunder rattled the lights. The ship pitched and rolled so violently that sleeping was nearly impossible. I spent hours gripping the edge of my bed, listening to drawers slide open and slam shut with every sway. Time itself began to blur. The storm turned days into an endless gray twilight. We couldn't see the sun or stars, couldn't tell morning from night. The clocks ticked forward, but every moment felt the same. The roar of waves, the groan of steel, the relentless pounding of rain. People grew restless, angry. In the dining hall, 2 men shouted at a steward, demanding answers. One slammed his fist on the table. "We've been in this for nearly a week. Why don't we turn back?" The steward's face was pale, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. He whispered something I'll never forget. "There is no turning back. The storm is everywhere." He was pulled away quickly by another crew member, who plastered on a fake smile and reassured the passengers. But the damage was done. Fear spread like fire. By the 7th day, whispers turned to rumors. Some said we'd been caught in a freak weather system, some endless cyclone no satellite could predict. Others claimed we were lost, that the storm had pushed us into uncharted waters. But the one that chilled me most was that the storm wasn't weather at all, that it was alive. I tried to shake the thought, but there were moments when I almost believed it. The lightning struck in patterns, always near the ship, always so close it seemed to chase us. The thunder sometimes rolled, not like sound, but like a growl. And once, as I stood by a window, I swore I saw shapes in the waves. Shadows too large to be whales, rising and sinking just beneath the surface. By the 9th day, passengers began disappearing. At first, we thought they were hiding in their cabins, refusing to leave. But then their rooms were found empty. Luggage, belongings, everything still there. Gone. A woman in the cabin next to mine went missing overnight. Her husband pounded on her door, screaming her name until security arrived. They searched everywhere. No trace. That night, I lay awake again, the storm raging louder than ever, and I realized something horrifying. It wasn't just trapping us, it was taking us. By the 10th day, the ship felt less like a vessel and more like a coffin adrift in the middle of nowhere. The crew tried to maintain order, but their polished smiles were gone. Their uniforms were wrinkled, their eyes bloodshot, their words clipped. They were breaking down, just like the passengers. People stopped trusting them. "They're hiding something," a man muttered to me at breakfast, if you could call it that. "Just a crust of bread and weak coffee. They know what this storm is." His voice shook. "They just won't tell us." At night, the hallways echoed with whispers and sobs. A child cried endlessly down the corridor, her parents begging her to sleep. An old woman prayed loudly in the lounge, clutching a rosary so tightly her knuckles bled. And then there were the vanishings. Every day, someone else was gone. Always at night. Always without a sound. Their cabins still full of belongings, but their beds empty. No one ever saw them leave. No one ever saw them taken. By the 12th day, panic set in. A group of passengers tried to force the lifeboats down. only to be stopped by crew. "You'll die out there," one officer shouted. "The waves will tear you apart." But the men screamed back, "Better to try than to wait for whatever this is." They were dragged away, locked inside their cabins. That night, I heard banging from the hallway, fists against doors, begging to be let out. Then silence. By morning, those cabins were empty. I started keeping count in my journal. Day 12, 3 missing. Day 13, 2 more. Day 14, at least 6. The numbers blurred together, but the truth was clear. Every day, fewer of us remained, and through it all, the storm raged, never easing, never shifting. Lightning splitting the sky every few minutes, thunder so constant it became a second heartbeat. The ship rocked endlessly, creaking, straining, as if it too wanted to surrender. One night, unable to stand the suffocating air of my cabin, I went to the observation deck. The rain pounded so hard it felt like needles against my skin. The wind howled like voices screaming. And then, for just a moment, the lightning revealed something. In the waves, towering above the waterline, was a shape, a silhouette. Too vast to be real, larger than the ship itself. A twisted mass of black, shifting like storm clouds but with form, with intent. And in the instant before the lightning faded, I saw it move. It was leaning closer, watching us. I staggered back, heart slamming in my chest, drenched and shaking. When I told another passenger the next morning, she didn't laugh. She only whispered, "I saw it too." By the 15th day, the storm no longer felt like weather. It felt like a cage. Alive, intelligent, and worst of all, patient. It wasn't just trapping us, it was hunting us. By the 16th day, silence settled over the ship. Not peace, but surrender. Conversations grew shorter, eyes hollow. We stopped asking questions, stopped demanding answers. Deep down, we all knew the truth. The storm wasn't going to end. The crew avoided eye contact. Their announcements stopped. The captain's voice, once so steady, hadn't come over the intercom in days. It was as though even he had given up. On the 17th night, the ship lost power. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed everything. The only illumination came from the endless flashes of lightning outside, each strike freezing the ship in eerie still frames, terrified faces, trembling hands, shadows moving where no shadows should be. Panic erupted. People screamed in the corridors, fumbling in the dark, doors slammed, footsteps pounded. Somewhere, glass shattered. The storm outside roared louder, as if feeding on the chaos inside. I clutched the walls, making my way toward the stairwell. My only thought was to reach the upper decks, to get air before the walls closed in completely. That's when I heard it. A sound, not from the storm, not from the ship, but from below. Deep, resonant, vibrating through the steel beneath my feet. A sound like breathing. Slow, enormous, inhuman. The realization struck me like cold water. The storm wasn't just surrounding us. It was something. Something alive. And we were inside it. The ship tilted violently, throwing me against the railing. Screams echoed as passengers tumbled down staircases. Luggage slid across the floor. Doors burst open. Water gushed in through broken windows, flooding hallways. And then came the final lightning strike. For a split second, the entire horizon lit up, and I saw it clearly. A face. Not human, not animal, but something vast and monstrous, formed of cloud and water, staring directly at us. Eyes like storms within storms. A mouth that opened with a roar of thunder so loud it rattled every bone in my body. And then, silence. When I woke, I was in a hospital bed. They told me a cargo ship had found us adrift, powerless, drifting in calm seas. Calm. As if the storm had never existed. But when I asked about the others, the doctors looked at each other uneasily. "Others?" one finally said. "You were the only one aboard." I know that isn't true. I remember the passengers. I remember the screams. I remember the faces in the lightning. The storm didn't just vanish, it took them. All of them. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls outside my window, I hear it again. The slow, heavy sound of breathing in the clouds, waiting for me. Because you can sail away from a storm, but you can't sail away from something that never ends. And if you think that's terrifying, just wait until you hear what happens after the lights go out on a cruise ship. When the halls fall silent, but the screams start at midnight. Story 4. The very first announcement told us something was wrong. Not a welcome, not a cheerful bon voyage. Just a voice crackling over the intercom as the ship left port. "Attention passengers, once aboard, you will not be permitted to disembark until the journey is complete." A strange thing to say. Everyone laughed nervously, assuming it was a clumsy reminder of safety rules. But I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Because no one had mentioned how long the journey would be. The first 2 days were paradise. Blue skies, sparkling pools, endless food. The crew was polite, but strange. They never introduced themselves, never wore name tags, and their smiles felt practiced. Like actors reading from a script. By the third night, people began asking questions. When's our first stop? Where are we headed? The crew gave the same answer every time. Soon, but the ship never slowed. Never turned. Just endless ocean in every direction. By the 5th day, unease spread. One man tried to ask the captain directly. He never returned from the bridge. At dinner, his chair was cleared, as though he'd never existed. That night, I heard something outside my cabin door. A sound like dragging footsteps, followed by a low voice whispering numbers. I pressed my ear against the door, heart pounding. The voice grew clearer. 7, 8, 9. I glanced at the number on my door. 710. The voice was counting, and it was getting closer. At first, no one noticed anything strange. Why would we? A cruise is supposed to feel timeless. Days blur together under the sun, cocktails flow endlessly, and every corner of the ship feels like a resort floating on blue glass. The first day was just that. Sunshine on the deck, kids splashing in pools, live music drifting through the air. My cabin was small, but clean. Soft sheets, a little balcony overlooking the endless horizon. Perfect. I spent hours exploring. Restaurants serving everything from sushi to burgers, theaters with velvet seats, a casino buzzing with laughter and the clink of coins. Everywhere I went, the crew smiled and nodded, polite but distant. The only odd thing was the very first announcement we'd heard. That strange, flat voice over the intercom as we left port. "Attention passengers, once aboard, you will not be permitted to disembark until the journey is complete." Nobody paid it much attention. We all laughed, shrugged, and toasted to our vacation. But the words lodged themselves in my mind. Until the journey is complete. What journey? Where were we even going? By the second night, a few passengers began asking questions. "When's our first stop?" someone asked at dinner. A woman in a floral dress leaned across her table, whispering, "We're supposed to dock in the Bahamas, right?" The waiter smiled politely. "Soon." It wasn't the answer. It wasn't even an answer. Just a word repeated over and over whenever anyone asked. Soon. By the 4th day, the whispers grew louder. We'd been at sea for nearly a week. No land in sight, no port stops, no excursions, just endless water. And the strangest part? No one had seen the captain. Not once. Passengers grew restless. I overheard arguments in the buffet line, people demanding explanations. The crew only repeated the same phrase, "Your journey will be complete soon." But no one knew what that meant. On the 6th night, I was woken by a sound, a soft dragging, like bare feet sliding against carpet. I sat up, heart thumping, listening. The sound grew closer, moving down the hall outside my cabin. Then a voice. Low, hoarse, whispering. 1, 2, 3. I froze. The voice was counting. I crept to the door, pressed my ear against it. The footsteps came nearer. The counting grew louder. 6, 7, 8. My cabin number was 710. I covered my mouth, trembling. 9. The voice stopped, right outside my door. Silence. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Seconds stretched like hours. Then, finally, the footsteps dragged away, fading into the distance. In the morning, the hallway buzzed with whispers. Cabin 709, right beside mine, was empty. The bed made, the luggage gone. The family of 3 who had been staying there vanished. The crew's explanation? They disembarked early. But how? We were in the middle of the ocean. No ports, no land. And that night, when the counting returned, I knew exactly what would happen next. The next night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the lights off, my ears straining for the sound. Every creak of the ship, every distant hum of the engines made my pulse quicken. And then, just past midnight, it came. The dragging footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming down the hall. 1. My skin crawled. 2. The voice was low, cracked, as if it belonged to someone very old or very dead. 3, 4, 5. Doors creaked open down the corridor. I heard gasps, muffled sobs, people pressing themselves against the walls of their cabins. Everyone heard it. Everyone knew. 6, 7. I clutched my sheets, heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. 8. My door. I bit my lip until it bled, forcing myself not to scream, not to move. The voice whispered the final number. 9. Silence. The air outside my door felt heavy, thick, as if someone, or something, was standing there, waiting. Then, slowly, the footsteps dragged away. I didn't sleep a second that night. By morning, another cabin was empty. This time, 711. A newlywed couple, their door wide open, their luggage untouched, their bed still warm. Gone. The whispers spread like fire across the ship. In the dining hall, I overheard a man whisper to his wife, "It's always at midnight, always in order." Another leaned in. "They're counting us down." By the 8th day, panic boiled over. A group of passengers confronted the crew in the lobby, demanding answers. "Where are the missing people?" one shouted. "What is happening to this ship?" The crew stood silently, their identical smiles frozen in place. Finally, one spoke. "Your journey will be complete soon." The passengers snapped. One man grabbed a crew member by the collar, shaking him. "Tell us the truth!" he screamed. The crewman's smile never faltered, but a single tear slid down his cheek. And then, without a word, he turned and walked through a staff-only door. It slammed shut behind him. The man followed. We never saw him again. That night, I tried something different. I stayed awake again, waiting. When the counting began, 1, 2, 3, I opened my cabin door just a crack. The hallway was dim, lit only by the soft glow of emergency lights. And there it was. A shadowy figure gliding down the corridor, bare feet dragging, leaving a trail of water on the carpet. Its head was bent low, long hair hanging like wet ropes. Its hand reached out as it counted, brushing against each door, and with every number, the lights flickered. It reached my door. I held my breath. Its wet fingers touched the handle. The lights went out. When they flickered back on, the figure was gone. but a new voice whispered in my ear, "You're next." By the 10th night, no one pretended anymore. The empty cabins were undeniable. Whole families gone, their luggage still neatly stacked, toothbrushes still wet, shoes still by the bed. Vanished, like they'd been plucked straight out of existence. Passengers gathered in the dining hall, refusing to return to their rooms. The staff served food, smiling mechanically, but said nothing about the missing. Every question was answered with the same dead phrase, "Your journey will be complete soon." That night, a group of men decided they'd had enough. "We'll fight it," one declared, his voice shaking but loud enough to echo across the hall. "Whatever it is, ghost, monster, I don't care. Tonight, when the counting starts, we don't hide. We don't lock our doors. We stop it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, desperate for hope. Others shook their heads, muttering prayers. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe we had a chance. That night, I stayed in the hall with them. 6 men armed with kitchen knives, broom handles, anything they could find. We sat in silence, the ship creaking around us, every breath tense with waiting. Then it came. The dragging footsteps. 1. The air grew colder, my breath fogged in the dim light. 2. The men gripped their makeshift weapons tighter. 1 whispered a prayer under his breath. 3. 4. We saw it then. The figure drifted into view, bare feet leaving wet prints, long hair matted with seawater. Its face was hidden, bent low, but its hand reached out, brushing each door as it passed. 5. One of the men screamed and charged, swinging his broom handle. It went straight through the figure. Water sprayed across the walls, soaking us. The figure didn't flinch, didn't even pause. 6. The lights flickered. When they came back, one of the men was gone. His knife clattered to the floor, wet and shining. 7. Another vanished. His scream echoed, but not from the hall. From inside the walls. The survivors broke. They ran, tripping over each other, pounding on cabin doors. 8. I stood frozen, unable to move. My cabin door loomed just ahead. 9. The figure stopped, right at my door. Its hand rested on the handle. Slowly, its head lifted, and for the first time I saw its face. It wasn't a stranger. It was David, the man who had vanished days ago. His eyes were pale, empty. His mouth opened, seawater pouring out, spilling down his chin. "You're next," he whispered. The lights went out. When they flickered back on, I was alone in the hallway. The knives, the men, the figure, gone. Only a trail of wet footprints remained, leading toward the crew-only door at the end of the hall. And for the first time, I realized the counting wasn't random. It wasn't just choosing. It was following a list, and my number was almost up. The trail of wet footprints led to the steel door marked crew only. I hesitated. My whole body screamed to turn back, to lock myself in my cabin and pray. But I knew it was useless. I had heard my number. I was next. My hand shook as I gripped the handle. It was freezing, slick with seawater. I pushed it open. The hallway beyond was wrong. It wasn't like the rest of the ship. No carpet, no bright lights, just bare metal walls, dripping wet, pipes hissing with steam. The air was heavy, damp, and smelled of rot. And there were voices, whispers, dozens of them, overlapping, echoing through the steel corridors. I recognized them instantly, the missing passengers. The couple from next door, the old woman I'd spoken to at breakfast, David. Their voices blended into one chilling phrase. "Your journey will be complete soon." I followed the footprints, deeper and deeper. The halls twisted in impossible ways, staircases leading downward even though we were already below deck, doors opening into corridors that circled back on themselves. Finally, I reached it, a massive chamber, the walls dripped with water, the floor flooded ankle deep. In the center, rows of chairs lined up neatly, like a theater. Every chair was occupied. Passengers sat perfectly still, their clothes soaked, their skin pale and bloated like corpses pulled from the sea. Their eyes were open, staring straight ahead, unblinking. Their mouths moved in unison, whispering the same phrase over and over. "Your journey will be complete soon." And at the very front, standing on a small stage, was the figure. It raised its head. Its face flickered between every missing passenger I'd ever seen. David, the couple, the old woman, shifting with every blink. Finally, it settled on mine, my own face. It smiled. "You're next," it said. The whispering stopped. Hundreds of heads turned toward me in perfect unison. The water at my feet rippled. The walls groaned, as if the ship itself was breathing. Then the counting began again. 1. The sound echoed from every mouth in the room. 2. The lights flickered violently. 3. I stumbled back, heart pounding, searching for a door, an exit, anything. 4. The voices grew louder. 5. The water rose, lapping at my knees, swirling around me like invisible hands. 6. The faces of the passengers twisted, mouths stretching wide, water pouring from them like waterfalls. 7. I screamed, but my voice was drowned in the tide of whispers. 8. The figure stepped closer, its face still wearing mine, its dripping hand reaching out toward my chest. 9. The voices stopped. Silence crashed over the room. And then everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my cabin. The sheets were dry. The sun shone through the window. The ship bustled with life. Families laughing, children running down the halls, crew carrying trays of food. It was as if nothing had happened. But when I stepped into the hall, my stomach turned cold, because everyone smiled at me. The same frozen, mechanical smile the crew had worn since day one. And when I glanced at my cabin door, I saw the number plate. Not 710, 728. The cursed number. The intercom crackled above me, that flat voice echoing across the ship. "Attention passengers, once aboard, you will not be permitted to disembark until the journey is complete." I looked down at my hands. Water dripped from my fingertips, pooling on the carpet, and I realized with crushing certainty I was no longer waiting for the counting. I was the counter now. Story 5. The first day felt like a dream. Sunshine over Miami, music blasting as passengers lined up with their luggage, kids tugging at their parents' hands, teenagers taking selfies with the towering ship in the background. The air buzzed with excitement, the kind of excitement you only get at the start of a long-awaited vacation. I checked in like everyone else, breezed through security, and stepped onto the gangway. The cruise ship stretched above me like a floating skyscraper, gleaming white under the sun. Inside, the lobby sparkled with glass chandeliers, polished floors, and staff greeting us with bright smiles and trays of champagne. It was everything I had imagined. My cabin was small but cozy, a window view of the endless blue ocean, a soft bed, the faint hum of the engines beneath me. I unpacked, changed clothes, and joined the crowd for the sail-away party on the top deck. Music thumped, drinks flowed, people danced. The horn sounded, long and deep, and everyone cheered as Miami's skyline shrank into the distance. It was the start of paradise. At dinner that night, I was assigned to a table with 4 strangers. A young couple on their honeymoon, an older woman traveling alone, and a man in his 40s who introduced himself as David. We laughed, ate, and swapped stories about our travels. The crew served steak and lobster, wine poured freely, and by dessert it felt like we'd known each other for years. But something strange happened at the end of the meal. The head waiter stopped by our table, smiling, asking if we enjoyed everything. Then he glanced at the empty seat beside me. "And your friend?" he asked. I frowned. "What friend?" "The woman who was seated here." He pointed to the untouched place setting. Silverware neatly arranged, glass of water sweating onto the tablecloth, bread roll untouched. "She didn't order?" We all exchanged confused looks. The couple shook their heads. The older woman said no one was sitting there. The waiter hesitated, clearly unsettled. Then he forced a smile. Perhaps a mistake in the seating chart. He quickly cleared the untouched setting and hurried away. We laughed it off. A small mix-up. No big deal. But later that night, as I returned to my cabin, I passed a hallway where the crew stored their carts and extra linens. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone standing there. A woman. She was pale, hair dripping wet as though she'd just climbed out of the ocean. She stared at me for a split second, eyes dark and hollow, and then she vanished into the shadows. I froze. My chest tightened. Had I really seen that? When I reached my cabin, I locked the door immediately. I told myself it was exhaustion, maybe too much wine, but deep down, I knew. That empty chair at dinner hadn't been empty at all. The second day of the cruise started normally enough. Sunlight spilled across the decks, kids splashed in the pool, and waiters circled with trays of cocktails. Everyone looked relaxed, as if we were 100 miles away from real life. But I couldn't shake what I'd seen the night before. That woman. Wet hair clinging to her face. Those hollow eyes. Maybe I dreamed it. Maybe it was just exhaustion. That's what I told myself as I went to breakfast. Except the couple from my dinner table were already there, waving me over. "You saw her too, didn't you?" the woman whispered as I sat down. I froze. "Saw who?" "The woman," her husband said quietly. "The one at dinner. She was sitting next to you." I stared at them. The waiter asked about her, but the chair was empty. They both shook their heads. "No, she was there. At least we thought so. Blonde hair, blue dress. But every time we tried to look at her directly, she seemed blurry. Like we couldn't quite focus." I felt cold. The older woman at our table joined us, leaning in. I saw her too, but when I asked David later, he swore he didn't notice anyone. We all turned. David was across the room, sipping coffee. He caught our glance, frowned, and shook his head firmly. "There was no one there," he mouthed. Our group fell into silence. After breakfast, I went to the guest services desk. I wasn't sure what I was going to say. How do you complain about a ghost? But curiosity burns stronger than fear. "Excuse me," I asked the crew member. "Can you tell me who's assigned to cabin 728? The woman tapped at her computer, eyes scanning the screen. Then she frowned. "Cabin 728 is vacant, sir. Has been since we left Miami," I swallowed. "Are you sure? Because last night—" She cut me off sharply. "I'm certain no one boarded under that number." Her tone left no room for questions. That night at dinner, the empty chair was there again, place setting perfectly arranged, glass of water sweating onto the cloth. But this time, the waiter didn't mention it. He avoided it completely, rushing past as if it wasn't even there. Halfway through the meal, the older woman stiffened, staring at the chair. "She's back," she whispered. I followed her gaze, and for a moment, I saw it too. A pale hand resting on the table, fingers tapping softly against the cloth. The couple gasped. The husband muttered a prayer under his breath. David looked furious, standing up so suddenly his chair toppled. "Enough. Stop this nonsense." He stormed away, leaving his food untouched. We sat in uneasy silence until dessert was served. And when I finally returned to my cabin that night, something waited for me. On the floor outside my door lay a small plastic card. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was a name tag, the kind crew members wore. But the name on it wasn't any crew member I'd met. It simply read, Passenger 728. And the back of the tag was wet. The third night, the dining hall felt wrong. The four of us sat at our usual table. The couple, the older woman, and me. David's chair was empty. At first we thought he was late. The waiter even poured him a glass of water. But as the minutes stretched, unease settled over us. By dessert, it was clear. David wasn't coming. The couple exchanged nervous glances. "Did anyone see him today?" the husband asked. I hadn't. Neither had the older woman. After dinner, we checked. His cabin door was locked, lights off inside. A steward passing by confirmed, "Mr. David hasn't been seen since last night." His tone was flat, rehearsed, like he'd been told exactly what to say. The next morning, an announcement came over the intercom. "Attention guests, we regret to inform you that due to personal reasons, passenger David has disembarked. Please respect his privacy." A lie. We were in the middle of the ocean, no port, no lifeboat missing, and yet the crew wanted us to believe he had simply left. That afternoon, I went to the guest services desk again, demanding answers. The woman behind the counter kept her smile frozen in place. "Sir, there is no record of a passenger by that name." I slammed my hand on the counter. "I ate dinner with him. I saw him every day. How can you say that?" She only repeated, "There is no record of a passenger by that name." Her smile never faltered, but her eyes flicked nervously to the side, toward her supervisor, watching us from across the lobby. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered the halls. The ship was quiet, only the faint hum of engines and the occasional creak of metal. As I passed one of the crew-only doors, I heard something. Voices. I pressed my ear to the door. At first it was muffled, but then I recognized it. David. He was shouting, panicked, furious. "Let me out! You can't do this! I'm not supposed to be here!" My blood ran cold. I banged on the door. "David, it's me!" For a second, everything went silent. Then his voice came again, but quieter, choked, desperate. "Don't let them put me in 728. The hallway lights flickered. A low hum vibrated through the floor, deep and unnatural, like the ship itself was growling. I stumbled back, heart hammering. When the lights steadied, the door was open. The storage room was empty. Only a trail of wet footprints led away from the doorway down the hall toward cabin 728. I followed them, trembling. Each footprint gleamed under the lights, as though the water never dried. They stopped right outside the cabin door. The number plate glinted. 728. My hand shook as I reached for the handle. The metal was freezing cold, biting into my skin. Slowly, I pushed the door open. The cabin inside was dark, damp. The walls dripped as if they were sweating. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of salt and decay. And there, sitting on the bed, was the woman. Her blue dress clung wetly to her skin. Her hair hung in dripping strands. Her eyes lifted slowly to meet mine. She smiled, and on the nightstand beside her lay David's cruise card, still wet. Her smile was wrong, too wide, too still. The kind of smile you might see in an old photograph, frozen forever. I stood frozen in the doorway, the sound of dripping water echoing in the cabin. The walls seemed to breathe, the air damp and suffocating. "David?" I whispered. The woman tilted her head. Her wet hair slid across her face like seaweed. She lifted her hand slowly, pointing to the nightstand. David's cruise card glistened under the dim light, droplets of water pooling around it. I stumbled forward, picked it up. It was ice cold. His name was there in bold letters, his photograph smiling back at me. Proof. But when I turned back to the bed, she was gone. The sheets were soaked. The mattress sagged as though something heavy still pressed against it. The smell of the ocean grew stronger, salty and rotten, like something pulled from the depths. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Behind me. I spun. The doorway was filled with passengers. Dozens of them, their clothes drenched, their skin pale and gray. Their mouths hung open, water trickling from their lips. Their eyes stared blankly ahead, but I recognized them. The older woman from our dinner table, the honeymoon couple, even David. All of them, standing silently in the hall, watching me. The woman appeared again, right beside me now. Her wet hand brushed against mine, clammy and cold. She leaned close, her lips almost touching my ear. "You've seen us now," she whispered. Her voice was like rushing water. "You can't go back." I staggered back, heart pounding. "What do you want from me?" Her smile widened. "To remember." The walls shuddered. The floor vibrated. and then the cabin door slammed shut behind me with a force that rattled the ceiling. Darkness. I don't remember how long I was in there. The air grew heavier with every breath. The sound of waves crashing filled my ears, though I knew we were still deep inside the ship. Faces appeared in the shadows, flickering in and out, mouths screaming without sound. And then, nothing. When I woke, I was back in my own cabin. My clothes were dry, my bed neatly made. The morning sun shone through the window as though nothing had happened. For a moment, I thought it was all a nightmare, until I stepped into the hallway. Every cabin door was open, every room empty, luggage scattered, half unpacked, plates of food abandoned mid-bite in the dining hall, the pool chairs deserted, the entire ship silent. I ran to the lobby. No staff, no crew, no passengers, just me. And then, on the intercom, a voice crackled. "Passenger 728, please return to your cabin." My stomach twisted. I stumbled back, shaking my head. No, I'm not. But then I looked down. Around my neck hung a name tag, the same one I'd found outside my cabin 2 nights earlier. Only this time, the writing was clear. 728. The voice came again, softer now, almost gentle. "Welcome home." The lights flickered, the ship groaned, and suddenly I wasn't standing in the empty lobby anymore. I was back in cabin 728, the bed soaked, the walls dripping, the woman smiling at me from the shadows, and this time there was no escape. Story 6. When I checked the ship's map, my cabin number wasn't listed. I thought it was a mistake until I learned no one else could even see my door. The cruise started like any other. Music, laughter, suitcases rolling across polished floors. I was assigned Cabin 6B12, nothing unusual. Until I looked at the ship's directory near the elevators. Deck 6 had cabins 601 through 611 on one side, 612 through 621 on the other. But there was no 6B12. Confused, I asked a crew member. She scanned my keycard, frowned, then forced a smile. "It must be a typo, sir. Don't worry, I'll show you." She led me down a narrow hallway I hadn't noticed before. The carpet here was different. Darker, older, frayed at the edges. At the very end stood a single door. My number, 6B12. The crew member's hand trembled as she slid the keycard into the lock. "Here you go," she whispered, almost too softly to hear. Then she hurried away. Inside, the room was strange, smaller than normal. The lights flickered when I turned them on. The air smelled faintly of seawater and rust. But the strangest thing? The window. Instead of showing the ocean, it showed the hallway outside. I stepped closer, staring through the glass. I could see the door across the hall, the carpet, the light fixture. And then I saw something else. Me, standing outside, staring back. I stumbled back from the window, my heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't possible. The view should have been the ocean, endless blue stretching into the horizon. Instead, I saw myself in the hallway. Only the me on the other side wasn't moving. He just stood there staring at me. I waved. He didn't. I shouted. No sound came back. Then, slowly, his lips began to move. At first, I couldn't understand. But after a moment, the words became clear. "Get out!" My skin prickled with ice. I stumbled back, tripping over my own bag. The lights flickered, buzzing faintly overhead. When I looked again, the hallway window was normal. Blue sky, calm seas, everything as it should be. I told myself it was jet lag, stress, an overactive imagination, but the dread sat heavy in my stomach. That night, the first strange thing happened. I woke at exactly 3:12 a.m. to the sound of dripping. At first, I thought it was the bathroom sink. But when I turned on the light, I froze. The carpet was soaked. A puddle of seawater spread across the floor, rippling as though something had disturbed it. And when I followed the trail, I saw wet footprints leading to the window. The ocean view was gone. It was the hallway again. Only this time, the me Outside wasn't alone. Shapes stood behind him, dozens of them. Pale, blurred faces pressed close, their mouths open in silent screams. I blinked. They were gone. The next morning, I asked at the front desk to change cabins. The man behind the counter typed into his computer, frowned, and shook his head. "Sir, there is no cabin 6, B12. I slammed my keycard on the counter. "Then what's this?" He picked it up, squinted, and his face drained of color. Where did you get this?" "You issued it to me yesterday." I snapped. His hands trembled as he slid it back across the counter. "We don't issue cards with this number, ever." The more I insisted about 6B12, the stranger the reactions became. When I asked the cleaning staff, they either shook their heads or hurried away without answering. One woman muttered something under her breath, in a language I didn't understand, before crossing herself and rushing down the hall. Later that day, I tried something simple. I stood at the end of the corridor and waved down a passing passenger. "Excuse me, can you tell me what you see down there?" He squinted, then shrugged. "Nothing, just a wall." "A wall?" I asked, stunned. "What about the door? 6B12? He looked at me like I was insane. "There's no door there." But I could see it, clear as day, the brass numbers glinting in the light. My suitcase still beside it. I dragged him closer, pointing right at it. "There, right there." He shook his head, confused. "You're pointing at the wall." I felt the blood drain from my face. I wasn't crazy. The door was real. I could touch it, walk through it, live inside it, but no one else could even see it. That night, I stayed awake, determined not to sleep. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the dripping began again. I turned on the light. The puddle was back, spreading wider this time, dark water lapping at my shoes, and the window showed the hallway again. My other self stood there, staring at me with hollow eyes. Behind him, the shapes were clearer now, dozens of pale figures pressed against the glass, their mouths moving in perfect unison. I pressed my ear to the window, and I heard it. Whispers, soft, layered, impossible to ignore. "Switch." The reflection raised its hand and pressed it flat against the glass. Against my will, my own hand lifted, shaking, trembling, inching toward the window. The moment my fingers touched the cold surface, a knock rattled the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks, and then a voice, my own voice. "Let me in." I didn't move, couldn't move. The voice outside my cabin door was mine, every syllable perfect, every inflection identical. "Let me in," it repeated, calm at first, then harder. "Let me in." My chest tightened. My hand still hovered against the glass, trembling inches away from my reflection's hand. His hollow eyes locked onto mine, lips curling into something between a smile and a sneer. Behind him, the pale figures writhed against the hallway glass. Their mouths opened wider and wider until their jaws stretched unnaturally, splitting at the sides. "Switch," they whispered, over and over. Louder, stronger. "Switch, switch, switch." The door rattled again, harder this time. The handle began to turn. I stumbled back, shouting, "Stay away!" My voice cracked in panic. The knocking stopped. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, in the reflection, my other self leaned forward, placing his face against the glass. His lips moved, slow and deliberate. "You're already inside." I froze. My stomach dropped. I looked around the cabin, the flickering lights, the dripping seawater, the walls groaning like metal under pressure. And then I realized, this wasn't my cabin. This was the reflection's. The knock on the door wasn't someone trying to get in. It was me, trying to get out. The glass splintered. Cracks spider-webbed across it as the pale faces pressed harder from the other side. The whispers rose to screams, echoing inside my skull. "Switch, switch, switch." The reflection's hand burst through the glass, icy fingers wrapping around my wrist. The water surged, rushing up past my ankles, my knees, my chest. I gasped for air as the lights flickered violently. And then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in the hallway. Dry, calm, everything normal. The carpet was clean, the lights steady. Passengers walked past, laughing, carrying drinks. I looked back. The wall was smooth. No door. No cabin 6B12. Just endless, ordinary wallpaper. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it all. That maybe it had been a nightmare. Then I caught my reflection in the glass of a nearby picture frame. It was smiling. I wasn't. Story 7. On the third day of the cruise, a passenger fell overboard. We all watched him vanish beneath the waves. The next morning he was back, but something was different. It started with chaos. A scream from the upper deck, people rushing to the railing, crew shouting over the wind. I pushed my way forward, heart pounding, and saw him, a man flailing in the dark water below. "Man overboard!" someone shouted. The alarms rang. Life buoys were thrown. But the waves were too strong, dragging him farther and farther away until his head slipped beneath the surface. And then he was gone. The crew searched for hours, circling the area, scanning with spotlights. Nothing. By midnight, the captain announced the worst. Despite every effort, we could not recover the passenger. The mood on the ship turned heavy. People whispered at dinner, some cried. A tragedy at sea. But the very next morning, I saw him, standing at the breakfast buffet, plate in hand, smiling, like nothing had ever happened. I froze. My blood turned to ice. Other passengers saw him too. Their faces paled, forks halfway to their mouths. Someone dropped their glass, shattering it across the floor. It was him. Same face. Same clothes. Even the same wristwatch. But his eyes were wrong. Too dark, too flat, like polished stone reflecting nothing back. When I whispered to the man beside me, "That's him. That's the one who drowned." He shushed me, panicked. "Don't say anything, just don't look at him." The captain made no announcement about his return. No explanation, no acknowledgement that the man we all saw drown was suddenly walking the decks again. But everyone noticed. At lunch, people whispered at their tables, sneaking glances. Crew avoided his presence entirely. They walked past him stiffly, eyes averted, lips pressed tight. When he spoke, it was always wrong. His words came a second too late, as if repeating someone else's line. "Beautiful weather today," he'd murmur, though the sky outside was gray and storming. Or he'd greet someone by name, a name he shouldn't have known. The most unsettling part was his smile. It was too wide, too long. Like he didn't blink while holding it, his lips stretched until the skin around them seemed ready to tear. One night, I saw him in the hallway outside my cabin. He was standing perfectly still, facing the wall, smiling at nothing. For 20 minutes, he didn't move. Then, without turning his head, he whispered, "I can hear you breathing." The next morning, rumors spread. Passengers who had spoken to him too long were gone. Their cabins empty, luggage untouched, toothbrushes still wet by the sink. When people asked the crew, the same answer came every time. They disembarked early. But we were in the middle of the ocean. By the fourth night, no one sat near him at dinner. The tables around him were empty, as though an invisible circle of dread followed wherever he went. But he didn't seem to mind. He just sat there, smiling too wide, his fork hovering just above his plate. Not eating, not drinking, just pretending. That night, I couldn't sleep. The storm outside had eased, but the silence inside my cabin was worse. I paced the room, my nerves raw, until I finally opened my door to get some air. And froze. He was standing right outside, not moving, not knocking, just waiting. His head tilted slightly when he saw me, and that same too-wide smile stretched across his face. "You shouldn't be awake," he whispered, voice dry and hollow, as though he hadn't spoken in years. I slammed the door shut and pressed my back against it, heart hammering so loud I thought it would burst through my chest. Minutes passed. Hours. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I checked the hallway. Empty. But when I returned to my cabin, there was something waiting on my bed. A wet wristwatch, the same one I'd seen on his wrist the night he drowned. My hand shook as I picked it up. It was still ticking, still working. But the second hand wasn't moving forward. It was moving backward. That's when it hit me. The man who'd fallen overboard hadn't survived. Whatever had come back onto this ship wasn't him. It was wearing his face, and it was getting stronger. By the fifth night, the ship was breaking down. Passengers huddled in groups, whispering, refusing to leave their cabins. Crew moved stiffly, silent, avoiding questions. The air felt heavy, charged, as though the ship itself knew something unnatural was walking its halls. And it was. He, the drowned man. Except by then, he wasn't pretending anymore. I saw him in the lounge, standing too close to a woman, his smile stretching wider and wider as she backed away. His neck twitched, bones cracking with each tilt of his head. When she screamed, the lights flickered. And in that flicker, I saw it. Not his face. Not human. Something pale and slick stretched beneath his skin, pressing outward, reshaping his features like wax melting over a flame. The woman was gone the next morning. Her cabin door stood open, clothes folded neatly, suitcase untouched. Empty. That night, I followed him. My fear outweighed my sanity. I trailed him through silent corridors, past the crew-only doors, down into the belly of the ship where no passengers were allowed. The air was damp, cold, my breath fogged with every step. And then, in the shadows, I saw him stop. He stood before a metal bulkhead door, water dripping from his clothes, though the floor was bone dry. He turned, and for the first time, he looked directly at me. Not the fake smile, not the hollow stare. His face split open, skin peeled back like wet fabric, and something long and glistening unfolded from inside. Rows of teeth. Eyes stacked where no eyes should be. A voice spilled out, layered and wrong, echoing in a chorus that wasn't his. He drowned. I borrowed him. You're next. The lights blew out. In the dark, I heard footsteps rushing toward me. Water splashing across the floor that wasn't wet. My lungs seized as I ran. Blindly, crashing up the stairs, through the hallways, slamming into my cabin, locking the door. Silence. I thought I'd lost it, until I turned toward the mirror. My reflection was smiling. Too wide, too long, like his end. Story 8. On the third night of the cruise, I took the elevator to Deck 9, but it didn't stop there. It kept going to a floor that shouldn't exist. It started late at night, after the bars had closed. The hallways were quiet, carpet muffling my footsteps as I made my way to the elevators. I pressed the button for Deck 9. The elevator hummed, smooth as silk, numbers ticking upward one by one. 6, 7, 8, 9. But it didn't stop. The screen flickered. 10, 11, 12. I frowned. The ship only had 9 decks. The elevator slowed, then jolted to a stop. The doors slid open with a soft hiss, and my stomach dropped. The hallway outside wasn't like the others. The carpet was old, frayed, stained dark in places I didn't want to imagine. The lights buzzed weakly overhead, half of them dead, the other half flickering. The air smelled of rust and salt. Cautiously, I stepped out. My footsteps echoed, louder than they should have. Every door lining the hallway was shut tight. Each one had a number. But the numbers weren't normal. 9A01, 9A02, 9A03. I checked the ship's map earlier that day. No such cabins existed. A faint sound drifted down the hall. A whisper. "Help!" I froze, straining to hear. "Someone, please." It came from one of the doors. I couldn't tell which. My hands shook as I tried the first handle. Locked. The second. Locked. The third turned easily beneath my grip. I hesitated, then pushed it open. The cabin inside was dark, damp, the air heavy with the smell of seawater. And there, in the faint glow of the flickering light, I saw something impossible. A passenger, or what used to be one. Skin pale, lips blue, water dripping from their clothes as though they'd just crawled out of the ocean. Their eyes snapped to mine, and they whispered, "You shouldn't be here." I stumbled back from the cabin, my breath sharp and uneven. The drowned passenger didn't move toward me, didn't attack, didn't even blink. He just sat there on the soaked bed, dripping seawater onto the carpet that looked older than the ship itself. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered again, voice breaking, gurgling with salt water. I slammed the door shut and staggered down the hallway. The whispers followed me, not from one direction. From every door, dozens of voices murmuring in unison, "Leave! Leave! Leave!" My chest tightened. I reached for the elevator, hammering the button. The screen flickered, numbers stuttering between symbols I didn't recognize. The doors slid open, but instead of the bright, clean elevator I had entered before, this one was different. The walls were rusted, the floor wet, puddles of brine gathered in the corners, and etched into the metal, scratched deep by fingernails, were words. "Don't ride alone." I backed away, heart hammering. That's when I saw movement at the far end of the hallway. Figures. Pale, wet, stumbling toward me. Their faces familiar. Faces I'd seen at breakfast tables, at the pool, in the lounge. Passengers. Passengers who had gone missing. Their lips moved in unison, whispering the same thing. "You shouldn't be here." I bolted into the elevator, jamming the close button over and over. The doors shut just as cold. Dripping hands slapped against the glass. The elevator shuddered. The numbers glitched again. 11, 10, 9. Finally, the doors opened. The normal deck 9. Bright, clean, alive with music and laughter, as if nothing had happened. But when I turned back to the elevator screen, it flickered once more. And for just a second, it didn't say 9, it said 9A. For hours, I tried convincing myself it hadn't happened, that maybe I'd been drunk, overtired, or dreaming. But deep down, I knew the truth. That floor, deck 9A, was real, and it wasn't supposed to exist. The next night, against every sane instinct, I returned to the elevator. I pressed 9. The screen flickered. 6, 7, 8, 9. And then, once again, 9A. The elevator jolted, the lights flickered, and when the doors slid open, I was back in that rotting hallway. The air was colder this time. My breath came out in mist. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, pooling at my feet. The stench of salt and mildew filled my lungs. But worse than the smell were the whispers. They started the moment I stepped out. "Help us. Let us go. Take my place." The doors closed behind me. I spun around, panicked, but there were no buttons. No way to call the elevator back. Just a flat wall of rusted steel. The only way was forward. I passed the doors again. 9A01, 9A02, 9A03. Behind each one I could hear movement. Soft footsteps, scraping, breathing, and then, from one door, a voice I recognized. It was the woman who had vanished 2 days ago. I'd seen her laughing at dinner with her husband. "Please," she sobbed from behind the door. "They're keeping us here. It's not the ship. It's the sea. It wants us." My hand hovered over the handle, heart racing. Should I open it? Free her? Before I could decide, the entire hallway shook. Lights flickered violently, and every door burst open at once. Passengers spilled out, pale, soaked, their eyes black and empty, mouths whispering in unison. "Take his place. Take his place. Take his place." Hands grabbed me from every side, cold and slimy, pulling me toward one of the open cabins. Inside, I saw a bed, soaked, waiting. The whispers filled my skull, deafening. "Lie down. Your turn now." The drowned passengers dragged me toward the soaked bed, their cold hands locking around my wrists and ankles. Their grip was impossibly strong, like iron bands. "No!" I screamed, kicking, twisting, but their whispers only grew louder. "Your turn, your turn, your turn." The stench of salt water filled my throat as they pulled me closer. The mattress sagged with wetness, water dripping onto the floor in steady streams. I glanced toward the hallway. The elevator had returned. Its doors stood open, glowing softly with clean, golden light. An escape, but I couldn't move. Their grip tightened, nails biting into my skin. And then I saw her, the woman I'd heard through the door earlier, the one begging to be freed. She was standing at the foot of the bed now, pale and trembling. Her lips parted. "Take my place." Before I could speak, she lunged. Not at me, but at the drowned passengers holding me. She clawed at them, shrieking like an animal. For a second, their grip loosened. It was all I needed. I tore free and sprinted down the hallway, heart slamming against my ribs. The whispers rose into screams, dozens of voices calling after me. "Come back! Your turn. Your turn." I dove into the elevator, slamming my hand against the wall. The doors closed just as wet. Clawing hands slapped against the glass. The elevator shook violently, rattling as though dragged between two worlds. The numbers scrambled, 9A, 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 and then 9. The doors slid open. Bright lights, music, laughter. Normal deck 9. Passengers strolled casually past, drinks in hand, oblivious. The world was normal again. But when I looked down at my arm, my stomach dropped. My wrist was dripping. Salt water, running down my skin in steady drops. And beneath the sound of laughter and clinking glasses, I could still hear it. Faint. Distant. Echoing from somewhere deep inside the ship. "Your turn, your turn, your turn."